Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Call this August 23rd, 2018 meeting of the AMATS committee to order. It is 3 o'clock, or 1:30, sorry. No longer. Okay, do a real roll call. Mr. Wilson? Here. Houston is here. McKee? Here. Smile. And Johnson is here. Okay, we have a forum. Craig, will you please read the public information announcement?
All AMATS meetings are open to the public. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant. At that point, the committee will be given a chance to discuss it, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you, Craig. Do we have approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Do we have any changes?
Why don't I check that? Diamond Transit Center, right? Just we're moving up $1.2 million, and I want to know who, what, when, where. What's that?
That's item A, 5A. We'll cover it tonight.
Okay. Any objections to the adopted agenda? Okay, seeing none, the agenda is approved. We have before us the meetings from July 26, 2018 for approval. Do we have a motion?
Move to accept, or approve, I guess, sorry. Move to approve.
Second.
Changes, discussion? Seeing none, the objections to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing now the July 26th meeting minutes are approved. Okay, moving on to agenda 5A, the AMATS Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP admin mod number 21, correct?
Yes, so I believe it was in the March timeframe, we had an administrative modification at the request of the Public Transportation Department to move some funding out of the Diamond Center pedestrian project and into some other portion of the AMATS allocation for transit, bus stop and facility improvement. And so we did that in the March timeframe. Actually, Ms. Acton just showed up timely, but I'll go through it and she can illuminate it if need be. But so we moved that in the March timeframe, moved the money out of the Diamond Center pedestrian project, and upon further review, it was determined that that was probably not an appropriate or maybe correct use of those funds. So this motion is to move the funds back in there where they should have remained. I think did we have anything else, Aaron? I forget.
Yes, there was a change for the bike project implementation plan and the Anchorage Area-wide Trails rehab. I believe it was admin mod 20 added some additional design funding in there, and upon further review, it was found that the design funding in the Anchorage Area-wide Trails rehab couldn't be obligated in time, so it's being moved to the bike project plan implementation for additional design work, so we can make sure we actually get that funding obligated.
Okay.
So,
Sorry.
it's open for questions, and hopefully between the folks who figure out the answer.
So, when is that money available? Is it enough to finish? Can we have people using it before the snow flies? At least just to be indoors?
For which project? For the Diamond
Transit
Center? I will defer to Ms. Acton, since she has an answer for you there.
So currently, the way that the Diamond Center sits, we are trying to get people out of the parking lot and into at least the sheltered area by October 1st. That's what we've committed to Hugh Ashlaffen for. Whether we're going to be able to get people into the small waiting area, that is some of the current challenges that we're having. The money is available, it's been available. We are actually currently spending it down. What has happened is we essentially started work on an area of the transfer facility that wasn't initially outlined in the funding request to FTA. So we're having to back up a bit, having to look at what those costs are, having to find an additional funding source to be able to make that piece whole, and so that we'll be able to open that back up to the public. So what the money was set aside for and originally obligated through FTA, and the 14-point matrix that was associated and approved and an environmental document done on, we kind of deviated from, and now we are, we paused, we looked at our next course of action and moving forward and how we can mitigate that being closed. So working to get people at least out of the parking lot by October, and then inside as soon as we can.
Good, thanks.
Mhm.
Any other questions from the committee? Questions from the public? Okay, hearing none. What's the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second?
Any objections? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay, any other action items, Craig?
No other action.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 6A, the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. Craig?
No real update except for to remind folks that we do have the work session on fiscal constraint next week on the 30th. Unfortunately, I put down the one that says September 30th, but it's actually August 30th, so it's Thursday. We'll have that work session. Right here.
Which room is that?
Right here, right back here, 10 to noon. So it's a joint TAC and policy committee work session, and the general idea is that most of the folks that are on both of those committees have not gone through the MTP process before. We want to just kind of really do a reminder, refresher, and a AMATS or a fiscal restraint 101 or maybe even 055 to kind of help people understand the process and what we have to do to get money out.
It's really important. It's just,
I agree.
it'll, otherwise, it's really hard to like.
Okay, any other comments from the committee? Any comments from the public? Okay, agenda item 6B, third quarter obligation report.
So you have that before you, there were copies over there. We are supposed to be, at this point, at the end of the third quarter, plus or minus 5%. We're at 2.42%, so we're right where we need to be in terms of how close we are to what was actually allocated versus obligated. It looks like we've pretty much obligated most of what we need to, so I don't know if you have anything to add, Aaron, but for the most part, we're tracking exactly like we are hoping we were going to be.
The only thing I would add is this does not reflect fourth quarter, which we're in right now. This stopped at the end of June. So the majority of what you see on here is still needing to be the additional anticipated obligation. It's been obligated. So we're pretty much on track for full obligation this year.
So I just want to express my appreciation to staff for, you're getting targets, you're halfway below where you need to be, and any other comments from the committee? Public? Okay.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, thank you. Two items. I probably drafting up a resolution for the assembly having to do with possible crisis of having one of the highways northbound impassable. And we've been through this before when it was stopped up a couple of years ago and we had 58,000 people jammed up. So anyways, I think Mr. Welton suggested, or if I understood correctly, that might be a subject that this committee would want to deal with or not. And so I just have a draft here that my first scribbling is about the issue. So my question to you all is that an issue that this body is prepared to take up? Secondly, and totally separate, for lots of reasons, I'm making another go at seeing if we can get the military to reduce a mile or so wide corridor of their land east of Muldoon. And the city needs it to build on for low-income housing, access to Jugat State Park, and possibility of a bypass that connects the Glen and the Seward highways, and so on and so forth. So I think with the situation with DOD nationally, we have perhaps an opportunity to do so, and so on. So I've also prepared a draft resolution that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit smart-mouthed, but I have the map here, I think came from you, and shows the land there. And I'm not an expert on most things, but it's inconceivable that the land near Muldoon corridor there would ever have a military value. So because of the great value of the bypass in connecting the north and south, I would think that that might be of interest to this committee. So you tell me what's appropriate and run me off if it's not appropriate to talk to you all. So if it is, then I would be delighted to work with you all.
So first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation for the recognition that you initiated with the Assembly for the work on the infamous bridge strike. That meant a lot to our folks and to the contractor and to everybody else. So I want to thank you for doing that. That was well received, and as you all know, we don't get too many of those. When we do get one, it means a lot, so I just want to express our thanks for that. I guess I'll defer to someone who has more experience in the committee than I do as far as how it's in.
I have to look at it to see exactly what it's requesting that we do.
Sure.
Obviously, we do construction projects and we do planning projects, so if it's something along those lines, it could fit in.
I guess I would suggest it goes to one of the members, right? It comes from.
Actually, I was gonna see if within the constitution, if you will, of what AMATS can and can't do, do we have the ability to serve in a work session type environment or work session function as an advisory group for the items that he's discussed, so that it's not necessarily an official AMATS action. It doesn't really fit the mold of what typically AMATS does. But I think he's coming to us asking for input and guidance from our perspectives as AMATS policy committee members. Is there a way that this group can serve in a advisory / work session capacity for something like that?
Or would want to.
Yeah.
I think so, because when they've done in the past, they've done the combination needs list that's DOT, local and state coming together and trying to come up with the needs that for the community versus what type of needs list per funding type. So there's lots of things that go into a needs list, and we have, and AMATS has that, all those different types of scoring criteria, how things get looked at. That can be shared with, because if you're building a project, you're trying to get it to score well in getting federal funding, that's where this committee can help with this, I think.
Here's the other suggestion I would have. I've been out with the mayors out in the valley, is it about a month ago, and asked them if they would provide somebody, maybe someone from staff or whatever, to attend the AMATS, because a lot of things we do affect people in the community every day, and I don't think they're well represented in the audience here. So I think it might be a good idea if we want to try to move forward with something like this, to have some type of venue where they can have input into what we're looking at doing, and I would imagine you'll get quite a bit of support for exactly what you're talking about, because a lot of those are the folks who get stuck when we have an incident or whatever. So, I'm not sure how that fits in with AMATS, but they do need to be a part of this. So perhaps a discussion with some of them about this. I mean, I've already had the discussion with them, I guess about a month ago. And that wasn't specifically on the plan, but that was the subject we talked about.
So I have a question, Craig. Since we're right in the middle of our national transportation plan, I mean, you're looking at the Glen Highway and all the different full alternatives. What analysis has come up that they could be helpful on different scenarios with dealing with the Glen Highway?
I don't know how far along they are.
Well, in relation to projects that are being looked at in the Glen Highway, some of the major ones are improvements to the interchanges, a fourth lane, HOV, HOT lane, high occupancy vehicle or high occupancy toll lane, frontage roads along the majority of the highway, specifically for emergency issues that come up. I know the Glen Highway ICM project is getting an additional hit of money to be looking at emergency service and how it's impacted out along the highway and what we can do to help mitigate it in the short term and long term. So speed up getting emergency vehicles out there, getting the incidents cleared, that kind of
All
stuff.
right, so what he's proposing is, I think all the alternatives that have been looked at is within the right of way, and he's looking at expanding the right of way in
No,
that area? Is that what he's doing, or?
No, I mean, the current alternatives for a fourth lane and a frontage road would be outside of the existing right of way. It would take a lot of input from the military. And they have already expressed their concerns.
So maybe
about it.
if we had that, somehow got you that information that the AMATS contractors have already collected, would that be helpful?
Yeah, so if you'll grant me a couple of minutes, Mr. Chair.
Can we,
I'm not,
excuse me, before we do that though, we're kind of off, and I'm supposed to kind of keep this thing running. So can we, let's finish with 6B. This is kind of a general topic that has anything to do with 6B.
Before we move on, can I just ask a quick clarifying question? On the technical advisory committee, is there a member from JVER?
No.
Has there ever been an outreach to achieve that? Because it seems like they are a key player in our transportation network.
We have a member from JVR on our trade committee, but other than that, and we also have one on our city advisory committee.
Okay, I hate to be bureaucratic here, but on agenda item 6B, are there any other comments from the committee? Any other comments from the public? Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Yeah, give me 2 more minutes. So I'm thinking, we're in an earthquake zone, and if we lost those bridges, what happens? We need to know if the military can build bridges with their engineers to restore a bridge within a week or so. Can the 2 railroad bridges be converted to carry a line of traffic? Or can the railroads carry with, on an emergency basis, thousands of people back and forth and south? Is the bridge that's on the military base, is there a way that we could get access to that? So talking about lane extensions and interchanges is great, but it's not what I'm talking about. And I'm not looking for help, I'm looking for somebody to take over the project because they have a responsibility of transportation in this area, and there's a major chokehold. I'm hearing that's not you guys. In that case, I'd be glad for the help, you know, and advice, counsel.
I did not intend to cut you off.
Oh, okay.
What I intended to do is finish off 6B that doesn't have anything to do with what you're talking about.
Ah.
And then.
I'm sorry, I thought we were on community.
No, like I said, that's not how we roll here. We give everybody the opportunity to talk, and I definitely want to hear everything you have to say. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, for goodness.
Sorry, we'll get back to you just in 1 second. So any more comments from the committee on 6B? Any comments from the public on 6B? Okay. So now we can kind of get into the general comments from the committee and go ahead, John.
It was just, Fred had 2 points. One is look at, Case Bridge goes down to the Glen Highway, the other one's the bypass. So look at the Glen Highway, and I had a recollection, you mentioned this before, that there is a study as part of our tip looking at Glen Highway, that kind of stuff. And I think I heard it at the TAP meeting. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes, well, there's multiple. There's a Midtown Congestion Planning Environmental Linkages Study that's going to look at 36th to about 20th and what to do there. And then there's in the draft tip, there is a project for a PEL, Planning Environmental Linkages Study, from where that previous one ends, 20th, 15th, to the Airport Heights area. No specific alignment selected yet, just in that general location of how to get the Seward and Glen connected through there.
Okay, I might have misunderstood. 'Cause I
In
was
the
thinking
current tip, there's the integrated corridor.
Yeah, in the current existing tip, there's an integrated corridor management study that's just looking at the Glen Highway and how to deal with incident management along the Glen
That
Highway.
might be what I heard. And is that what we were talking about here, though, if a bridge went down? You're thinking tow trucks will get there quicker.
Yeah,
This is much more serious. A bridge goes down, or would that be part of that study?
it's looking at all of it. It's looking at, taking example, the bridge being hit and it kind of disabled that whole lane of traffic. It's, okay, well, what do we do? Do we put everyone on frontage road, or do we move everyone to the opposite travel and get them around as a short term? And the long term, an option could be build roundabouts, interchanges, and then just have people circle around and get on the, bypass it easier. What are the options? We can sit and talk about it all day, but we don't know until we actually look at it, and that's what ICM Phase 2 is looking at.
So, and that's, I understood. So I think Fred's come up with some points that may be more expansive and considering. It's like, let's look at the base and the railroad and stuff. So hopefully that would be, is that something that could be looked at as part of that study?
I mean, I would recommend that information be given to the study contractors when it starts, and that could be options they look at. I don't know what kind of parameters, if they're setting it only on the existing right-of-way, or if they're saying, I'm trying to push them to look at long-term solutions that could be outside the right-of-way, but I don't know, depends on what's fundable.
So when would that be into?
Go ahead, sorry.
When would that be into?
Hopefully soon. They don't have a consultant on board yet, so we're still going through that process, so I can't really say too much more about it, unfortunately.
But would we know, and I could just?
Yes, I'll make sure to keep everyone updated when that gets moved forward.
Could I just real quick give you an update of what was the result of that bridge strike? One of the things that we have been working on, we've been meeting with the troopers, we've been meeting with the Muni, we've been meeting with a lot of different folks on, we could have handled that better. And so we have been working on incident command structure, which is a federally recognized method of dealing with this. I've taken, in the last 3 months, I've taken 6 of the courses that they offer. One of them was a 3-day class. And so that's the short term. If something happens, well, what do we do right now? So that's something we are working on. And it's, the one thing I want to make sure we don't do is, there was a bridge strike out there. Well, what if we have an avalanche on the Seward Highway going south? I mean, there's not many commuters, but that's still a major corridor. So what we want to do is prepare for how are we going to set up our teams if we have any kind of a major event, an earthquake, a tsunami, whatever it is. That's the short term. I know AMATS is looking at some options for you know, if a road, part of the road is out, what are our options? The state of Alaska is also doing that. What we might want to do is put together, like, here are the different things we're looking at, both DOT, PF, and AMATS. Some of those are joint, I think some of those we're just looking at on our own. So that might be, I would like to get some voices from the valley to contribute, because people out there probably have ideas too, what they think might work. But the idea of the railroad, I think, is certainly, when we've included the railroad in some of our discussions too, because they're a big resource. So, Chris?
I'll just add to that don't leave out both the state level and the municipal level offices of emergency management, which is really this is what they do 24/7. So the concerns that you've raised and the hypothetical alternatives, et cetera, be sure that you get to know Kevin Spillers and his team at the local OEM. I'm not familiar with the state level personnel, but that's all they do. Disaster plan all day long. It's very impressive what they come up with. But that's where the solutions come. So.
Yeah, when we had that big pilot because of the cops chased a guy down, the car burned up in one lane and he went over and died, and then the other side was down for, I don't know, 13 or 14 hours. But one of the things we worked on from a state level was the reader boards at both ends, and the public safety being almost with a radio call, be able to control that and get real-time quick information. The other ones was half a dozen places where you could cross the median, to turn around and go back, and a few things like that, all of which make sense. I didn't realize the emergency preparedness people were looking at those major corridors. Part of it being an escape route, but we're talking about people getting back and forth to work, getting to the hospital, getting to the airport, and which is only emergency on some levels. Toilet paper was selling for $25 a roll out there during that 13 hours. Probably not emergency, but certainly an issue and so on. But I think we need to look at everything and hope we never have to use any of it and so on. And losing 2 lanes was a issue, but out the Connect River, you can actually go to the old Glen, and that plugged that up for a lot of time. Where there's 2 more bridges there at Eagle River, but it's going to be a huge disruption. So,
one of the things that I learned, this was about 6 years ago, I went and bought emergency boxes for my vehicle, my wife's vehicle, my son, my daughter. And one of the big issues with folks like us is you gotta have your own house in order, so to speak, before you can be prepared to carry out your functions as a regional director or whatever, because if don't know where my family is or there, then I'm not gonna be much use for trying to, so that's one of the things we've also talked about. So we've been having tabletops where we bring in, our safety people, they come up with a scenario, we sit around and go, okay, who's doing what, how are we, and one of the big things that you'll find in a lot of these disasters is the ability to communicate is a big deal. So we have our
Absolutely.
radios out, we're showing folks how to use them, and trying to, but I don't think that's exactly what you're talking about for more the long term, so.
Yep. And Chris's point is good. You ought to have somebody from Jaber over here and say, that bridge that you've got to the west over there, what do they carry? What in the world would it take to get physical access as well as permission for folks to use it? And how do we route traffic? I thought DOT and the police did a pretty darn good job. You can criticize yourself, and I can't. But we need to have, you're right, we need to have it. And boy, asking that the Corps and the construction battalion out there, how quick can they build a bridge? I mean, they build bridges pretty quick to take tanks across, and where would it be? And could we get it near one of the frontage roads or, whatever? I mean, it'd just be nice to know what capacity they have out
And I
there.
think, Mr. Chairman, I think that the offices of emergency management, I know ours, I don't speak for the municipalities, are in regular contact with the base and probably know the answers to those questions.
And they do every spring, they do a statewide, and it's a different scenario every year, but it basically is, no matter what the disaster is, who's doing what. So they are, Any other?
So, can I walk away here? I would like to know what you can do and what you want to do, if anything. And if you want to be helpful, I appreciate that.
So if I may, Mr. Dyson, I think I heard two issues. One is the emergency preparedness one, which I don't know that, I think we should be informed about it, but I don't know that we are the best avenue for emergency preparedness discussions.
Okay.
The second one was the access issue, the east properties, east
Right.
lands, because there could be a transportation function. You mentioned housing and some
Yep.
other stuff. And that one, I don't know what our role could be, Craig, but I, as a person, I would like to be engaged in that effort. So if there is a role that we can play in an advisory capacity for Mr. Dyson, or whatever form that takes, I think we should be.
So I guess one suggestion I would have is it was informative to me because I work with a lot of people who are former military, and this is bread and butter to them. For me, it's kind of new. I've been involved in disasters before, but not on a formal, level, and not at a high level certainly. It was an eye opener to me what's already there and the structure that's already there. So it might be beneficial for the assembly to have your safety folks come in and go, here's what we do, and here's what we're prepared to deal with. And one of the things we've started doing is even smaller incidents, we're initiating our incident command structure. The commissioner's doing that right now on something, just to make sure, even though we don't really need it for that type of activity, just so we understand what the relationships are and who's going to be doing what. So it probably would be an eye opener for a lot of the assembly members if they come from my kind of background. Any other general comments?
Yeah, so on member comments, so when we had you over for that resolution, I specifically didn't take an opportunity to get on a grandstand because I figured there was enough grandstand going on. And I note in the tip that's out for our just finished comment that there is a substantial increase in the funding proposed for the downtown Glen Seward environmental linkages. And I think that it is always incumbent upon someone who makes requests that might sometimes be perceived as demands to say thank you when words are followed through. And to see that project on there and to see it funded as it was, I express gratitude from my neighbors and from my community and from myself personally. Thank you very much.
one thing I'd like to add too is, we were going over the meeting minutes from the last meeting, and there were a number of directives from this committee to staff. And I'm always concerned about when we identify something, that's great. But if we identify something and we don't actually follow through, that's worse than not even identifying it in the first place. That's not how, as a project manager, that was something I'd never put up with. So I guess what I would suggest, and I'm open to comments from the committee or comments from the public on this one, is that every time we meet, someone tracks what staff is directed to do. We have a spreadsheet that says what the date was, what the request was, who made the request, and when it's due, so that at the next meeting, we could go over that and say, okay, here's what was requested, because going through the meeting minutes from last time, there are a whole lot of things that we asked staff to do. And I don't have the time to go back and highlight everything I asked for and make sure that it was done or not done. And if there's something that we asked for and then someone discovers that it's a lot more work than we thought it was, it'd be good to know that too. So I'd be open to committee's comments on that. John?
So is that a direction to the staff?
Right.
It'll be the first thing on the spreadsheet.
You know, it sounds like a great idea.
Okay.
And we can lose track during a meeting of.
In fact, the second on the agenda. Just an update to previous requests.
Or the running one.
Right, like separate agenda by.
And I guess what we do in our meetings is that at the end of the meeting, someone then reads it off and goes, okay, here's what I understood you asked for. And then we get a verification and, oh, no, that's not what I want something else. Or I think it is wrong. So,
It's not just what we ask for staff, it's what we direct back to the THC as well.
right.
You know.
Yeah, any kind of, yeah.
And who's responsible and when it should be back and all that spirit.
Meal orders, want tea or something like that. Sorry.
So have you noticed that things have slipped? Because I mean, I do see, I've been going to the TAC meetings and seeing, oh, this came back from the policy, you know, it's not like everything's missed, and maybe none. I mean, there's sense, right? But, are you going to the minutes?
When
on this?
I know, I'm pretty sure Aaron does this, but when I look over the minutes, because we both edit all sets of minutes that Laurie does for the TAC as well, so we look through it to just confirm, this is what I thought they had requested, whether it's the TAC or the policy committee, and make sure that that's already underway. So you can do that already.
Yeah, it's not that I found anything, it's just, I think there's two things. Number one, it makes sure we have clarification at the end of the meeting. This is what I asked for. No, that's what I asked for. And then I just kind of, when I look through these, I was like, wow, looks like Chair Kemp is asking for a lot. It looks like John's asked for stuff. And, is it, it just seemed like as a project manager, that's just something I've always used, and it seemed like, but if it's not something we think we need, then I'm not, bent over to get it done. It just seemed like maybe a way to track stuff. But anyway.
I think it's a good idea, and then you don't have to gas so much. What do they mean?
Or you may probably.
Doesn't matter what I do, just what your committee wants, so do whatever you guys need to do.
It's when we get to adding a percentage accomplished at the end. Now that's when we get. So.
Well, I might add it to the agenda maybe at the end.
Right.
Recap, action items.
Or perhaps it's more appropriate in like an old business section of the agenda, because typically at least at the last meeting, the requests that we made were all related to a specific agenda item that technically is now old business. So it can be an old business item, and it can be progress report on, committee member requests. And we have that spreadsheet matrix to sit down with and say, okay, Weddleton asked for, what does Fairbanks Complete Streets checklist look like? Here it is. Check. What Camp asked for, at what point in a project do they actually start implementing checklists? Is it at 35%? Is it at 95%? And then we have that answered. So that's how we can work through old business.
Well, I think that, but I was thinking like at the end of this meeting today, we would go, okay, so I wanted to make sure that they do the ICM for Glen Highway, that
Right.
we're informed, so we can kind of remind, make sure the scope includes.
I think you're both
Exactly.
right. It would be, at the beginning of the meeting, they would go over what was asked last time, what was accomplished, maybe what's still outstanding, whatever. At the end of the meeting, it would be, here's the new list.
For today.
So I have just a bit of a bureaucratic kind of recommendation. Be wary of the term old business and unfinished business are two different things. Unfinished business means business not yet completed on the agenda still. Old business means business already discharged and completed according to Robert's rules at least. And so what Mr. Shooty just said was actually accurate. There are some items that are old, done already, but we still have some questions that we want to talk about those issues. And unfinished items, again, are items we haven't voted or discharged or approved and are still pending action. And so just from a technical perspective, there's two categories of business there.
How does it work with the assembly agenda though? 'Cause
The
you have
assembly
old
agenda is
business that-
wrong.
Oh.
And I have talked about that a lot.
Robert's rules.
Yeah, fix Robert's rules. No, it's old business is business you've already finished.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I'm directing staff to create a spreadsheet,
Bureaucracy.
and we'll run with it next time, and I'd like to have it on the agenda as, at the beginning of the meeting, to go over what was asked of staff in the last meeting, order of attack in the last meeting, and then we'll have it at the end to capture what we had asked for in the current meeting.
Great.
Okay, any other comments from the committee or comments from the public? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jessica Smith. I'm the planning manager for the AMATS Borough, and I was directed by Mr. Musi to come and attend the AMATS meetings and just make sure that we've got a little, just little ears out here. We are looking forward to designation as an MPO ourselves, so I'm here in a learning capacity, and I'll see you guys around. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for coming. Okay. Let's see, thank you for all for your participation. The meeting is now adjourned at, I think this is a record 2:06.